Hey there, you on the table. I wonder if you'd mind taking a brief survey. Start out. Who are you?
Who would have the power to send their Audi to the 7th floor?
Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Wait.
I'm sorry. No, Irving!
Mr. Milkshake!
At the time of this actual recording, it's my actual birthday, so on behalf of myself and to all the people who knew since the beginning that it was Helena, please take the time to pat yourself on the back. And for those who doubted or ignored the clues or just didn't think it made sense for the story, and when you saw the reveal happening, look, we all still have love for you. It's all good. Because there are plenty of mysteries that remain unanswered with this show, but thankfully we can at least erase one from the list. Hello to all you lovely innies and outies out there, and welcome to my deep dive breakdown and review of Severance Season 2, Episode 4. An episode in which we venture into the unknown and learn the secrets of Kier's real or made-up brother, Dieter. We also get some sexy time, but we also say goodbye to one of the refiners, and it might be permanent. With all that said, get your marshmallows ready as it's time to discuss this incredibly weird and strange and phenomenal episode. Spoilers ahead. We open on Irv's Audi's face and we see and hear the effects of the Audi switching to the innie, similar to how it happened in the season 1 finale. Now later in this episode, we find out that the Audis allegedly approved this team building weekend experience, but I don't know if I entirely believe that, and there's a lot of things that I don't actually think happened in this episode. We'll discuss that a little bit later. Now Irv finds himself in the middle of a frozen body of water and screaming hello in hopes that someone hears him, which they do, and it ends up being Mark S. Now both Mark and Irv have no idea where they are, as Mark suggests he get off the ice and take the path around to find him. Now Irv does his best sand walk from the movie's Dune on the ice and makes his way up to the cliff to find Mark, but before that he runs into Helena, not Helly, who magically appeared out of nowhere and pretends she had no idea where she came from, and Irv, just like he did in episode 1 of this season and like he did in last week's episode, he can just tell that something's off and she is probably lying. All three are now up on top of the cliff and they find Dylan, who's shocked to be outside for the first time as his innie. Yes, technically his innie woke up in the outside world, but it was in his closet and he didn't really get to experience the actual outdoors. Now going back to Mark saying that he woke up on the ice, Irv said the same thing, but Helena, we know who's lying, but says that she woke up on the cliff, and then Dylan comes out of nowhere and asks if it's them. Now going back to that last part, I'm assuming that this being Dylan's first time in the outdoors, that he wanted to make sure that this was the innies that he was speaking to. Now addressing the separation and when they find themselves, I'm assuming that this is similar to when they go to work and they stagger them one by one so that the Audis don't know the other's Audis and they don't meet each other before the switch happens. But it's also got me thinking, I wonder what protocol they're using for the innies to be in the outdoors. Now as they take a look around, they hear a sound coming from a television which is playing the Cure Chosen One hymn. Now take a look at this exact spot from moments ago when they first met up. That television isn't there, but all of a sudden it magically appears. Also, take a look at the snow. Doesn't it kind of look artificial, and not from a visual perspective by the VFX team behind the show, but like it was made up by Lumon to give the illusion or the impression that it's actually real snow. Now as they approach the television, which by the way, how did it manage to be powered on without being connected to actual power? Crazy to me, but that's the last of their problems as Mark grabs the remote and presses play on the tape. We see Milchick, who welcomes them to their very first ever outdoor retreat and team building occurrence.
This Ortbo is in response to your desire to see the outside world. With your Audi's blessings, you will spend the next 2 calendar days walking the meadows, thickets, brambles, and brooks that make up the Dieter National Forest.
Who the fuck is Dieter Egan?
Dieter Egan? Some of you may be quietly yearning to learn more.
Now Dieter Egan is a mystery to the team, but Milchick assures them that the truth they seek lies in the 4th appendix. Now it's important to note that to me this video basically is giving the team their purpose on this experience. This is a test to see if they can refrain from indulging in their own desires and natural impulses, and seeing if they can withstand the woes of this experience defined as great sorrow or distress. Now I'm a stickler when it comes to knowing when and where the story takes place within the overall season, and I'm pretty sure that this is at the end of the work week and they're experiencing this on a Friday going into the weekend. But let's address the elephant in the room. At least this is a big question that I had throughout this episode. And that is this an actual location outside of the Lumon building? Now I can hear it in the comments now. Yes, it's real, you idiot, but listen, just hear me out for a second. Last week we were introduced to a new department and we saw the largeness of the space in which they operate in, and think about the size of seeing the rest of the ODN department. Could this be some department that is huge in scope and scale and it's infusing real life tangible things, but it's also in some type of simulation? I say all that because I struggle to believe that this is an actual real place, but there are tangible things within this place. But again, you'll notice the shot of the flurries of the snow, but once they walk past the rock, it stops. It stops right before the video plays, that way that the snow isn't distracting the video, and maybe it's like a bubble created for this particular spot, but also it has electricity. I also just question the reality of where they are because I would imagine this is a huge liability, and I don't believe that the Audis would approve this. But back into the scene, the team must go to find Scissor Cave based on the video's instructions, which by the way wasn't weird or creepy in any way. But speaking of weird and creepy, the team sees a person dressed and looks just like Mark. Now in the closing credits, these characters are referred to as shadow versions of the characters, but they're also called twins within this episode. As we see, the shadow twin tethered version of Mark points them in the direction that they need to go. Now let's talk about these twins or shadow characters. Now could they represent another version of the Innies, or are they a recreated version of the team? A more refined version, but without tempers that, according to Kier, makes up the human soul. You'll notice that none of them are dressed properly for the occasion, which again makes me think that this place isn't real and it isn't as cold as you're led to believe with it being in a snowy environment. Remember refiner Gwendolyn from Branch 5X said that her perpetuity wing had animatronic cures? Could these shadows be animatronics? We never see them walk or actually move. Now obviously their hands and their arms are moving, but they're always placed in particular locations that we see them in. We know that the work is mysterious and important, so do they work the graveyard shifts for when the Innies leave for the day or over the weekend and they're constantly refining the numbers? Could these be the lavas that the other departments made a rumor about being created from the MDR department? Are these what the goats are for? Are they nurturing these individuals, these beings, these things? Or could this be something Lumon cooked up on the testing room floor, which speaks to the fact that since the beginning of Season 1's opening title sequence, we see these multiple versions of Mark in that title sequence. Are these the multiple versions that we see throughout those opening credits? A lot of thoughts, a lot of theories. Drop your thoughts and theories about who these shadow characters are. Now you notice that this is all happening within the first 10 minutes of this episode, and there's already so many questions and mysteries, but we see the team follows the instructions and they go to the direction that they're pointing in as we get the opening title card, but we don't get the opening title sequence, which is very interesting. Now as we see them walking through the forest with a sense of adventure, but you can see the looks on their faces convey a feeling of both excitement but also nervousness to what lies ahead on this team building experience. As they continue on their way, they find more help in the form of Helly, our shadow twin, as they make their way into the Scissor Cave. Now inside they find the fourth appendix as they discover something new about Kier.
I was not born into this world alone. The lodgings of my mother's womb I shared with another, a twin brother who was called Dieter.
As they are told by the passage to walk into Kier's alleged twin brother's footsteps as they read away to Kier describing his brother who spilled his lineage on the soil, which apparently means that he was caught masturbating. Now this is just my interpretation of this particular story and the meaning behind it. First off, I don't entirely believe this whole twin story, but I do believe Lumon wants this to represent an inner battle between the Innies and the Audis. As we later discover in this episode, Dieter was punished after going out alone and coming back changed, and he later died. I think Lumon wants the Innies to not be so concerned or consumed by what their Audis' lives are like, especially after experiencing the OTC situation, as their Audis represent Dieter, someone who came back different and was driven by living in the woods and indulging in the temptations of the outside world. To me, Kier in this story represents the purities of the Innies' experience on the severed floor, being less concerned by those same temptations of the upstairs world. They're using this story to encourage the Innies to not focus so much on their Audis' lives because it could harm or get them killed. Another Lumon fear tactic to get the refiners back on track to focusing on the work. From here, they find Dylan's shadow twin who points them in the next destination. Now, this is one of the closest looks that we get early in the episode of one of the shadows up close, and while it resembles Dylan, it clearly isn't the exact one-for-one of him. But I also want to note how their feet is buried in the snow, which to me means that they've been here for a while. Now we see Irv from afar. He's watching Mark and Helena speaking privately, and again, Irv knows that something's off with her. Now he confronts Mark about what they were discussing and tells Mark about his sneaky suspicion that Helly has been lying about what her outie saw, and he doesn't trust her. He says that Mark, which is very true, doesn't see the ways of her deception because of his feelings toward her. Now Mark pushes back, but they come across something that resembles a dead seal, which Irv suggests they eat it because them consuming food ahead isn't a guarantee. Now there's a disagreement between Mark, Irv, and Dylan after Mark mentions Irv's bad experience on the outside world last time, and you'll notice how Helena is watching this conversation. Now her paying attention to this conversation so intensely to me plays into one of the reasons behind Helena's situation and pretending to be Helly. To me, she's trying to get information on this conversation because Irv was the only person during the OTC situation that Lumon still doesn't know what he knows or exactly what he did with his innie during that time, and Helena is trying to get this information from him by being so nice like we saw her saying to him last week and trying to get close to him to learn information that only Irv has shared with Dylan. Let's talk about a deeper meaning or the significance of seeing this seal. Now, I did some research on what it means when you see seals, especially when you're dreaming or in a meditative state, especially with this episode feeling like most of it's a dream at times. I found that their presence might often mean that there's an incoming message from your subconscious depths or from the spiritual realms. It's said that their appearance might be triggered by current emotional states such as feelings of insecurity, restlessness, or need of balance between physical needs and spiritual well-being. Going back to this being one big Lumon test, could this be yet another example of them subliminally using this as creating a sense of balance for their innies? Now they arrive to the destinations to find their twins and their shadows, who's supposed to represent Kira and Dieter as they successfully reach Woe Hollow. Now, I don't know if it was me, but I thought it was interesting or maybe even foreshadowing that we didn't see Irv's twin or shadow giving them guidance, almost indicating that he's going to be leaving the group by the end of this episode. Now, Mr. Milchick makes his appearance wearing all white, which could symbolize positivity or purity or even new beginnings. Now, this of course being in contrast to the team wearing all black, which can symbolize mystery or sometimes even associated with a sense of rebellion or power. Now, Mr. Milchick tells them that Woe Hollow is the tallest waterfall on the planet and is on sacred earth, which is obviously a lie, but of course the innies don't know that. Another made-up Lumon story to add to the myth of Cure, as he makes a joke about them not eating, but he tells them,
Lumon will always protect and provide.
Now this actually might be the best shot that we get of the tethered shadow twins, which again, what are they, where do they come from, and why is the Helly R1 head tilted like Michael Myers? Now they arrive to where they're going to be resting for the next 2 days, where Miss Wong has prepared food and they see the great amenities. We see Mark is in awe and discovering fire for the first time as Miss Wong says,
"Pretty cool, right?"
Now, we haven't gotten a ton of screen time or lots of lines of dialogue from Ms. Wong, but her saying to Mark, who admired the fire, that's pretty cool, right? Was that her just hyping up this whole situation for the innies, or is this possibly her first time experiencing all this as well? It also dawned on me in this scene that this might actually be the longest time that the innies have been awake. They're used to their normal 8-hour workday, and they're being encouraged to actually experience what it's like to actually rest and go to sleep. Now, to me, this is when Irv really got his confirmation that he needed to know that this wasn't Helly R. As she enters his tent, she gifts him with a snow seal in case he was hungry, which is obviously calling back to him saying that they should eat that dead seal that they found earlier in the episode. Again, I said this last week with her saying that they've got Irv, and now this moment here, she's just trying too hard to fit in. Now, Irv doesn't relieve the pressure on her as he asks her what she saw during the OTC. Now, she reaffirms that she was telling the truth as he tells her that it's okay for her to be honest because it won't change anything, but she says his name and leaves. Now, if you've been watching my videos, you saw in real time how I came to the realization that it was Helena since the start of the season, but this moment for us as an audience and for those who had any doubts that this was Helena, This moment was the nail in the coffin. We've seen and heard the cadence in Helena's voice. It's very cold, it's very calculated, it's very stern, and also very robotic. With that said, listen to how she says his name when he questioned her.
Irving.
That was 100% the cadence of Helena. Think about the conversation she had with Cobell
My father apologizes.
when she's kind of upset and when she's kind of like on the fence, right? She unintentionally let Helena out. Irv has been the only one who's called her on her BS, which, by the way, Irv is the MVP of this episode. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but he's the only one that's been calling her out. He hasn't bought into her being Helly, and she's also upset to not find out what Irv has done on the outside. She tried to gain his trust, but it clearly failed, and she finally let out her real side in this very moment. I also want to point out how Irv wouldn't let go of his instincts that something was off about her, and just remembering the finale of season 1, how he saw the list of names of the Audis of the severed employees, and he most likely recalled not seeing Helly's name on that list. We see Ms. Wong playing a very cool theremin, which is an instrument that allows you to play it without touching it. As they sit around a fire surrounded by marshmallows with Kier's face on them, Milchick shares another chapter from the appendix.
That we be woodland partners forever. I was looking at him when his eye came out. It popped from the socket, driven by a sudden torrent of pus from his skull.
Now, to my understanding, Dieter didn't want to return to their father and wanted to stay in the woods, but we see the story takes a very dark turn. Again, Dieter wanted to stay and not return home, and he died in a horrible death. Lumon wants the Innies to stay inside and stay safe from being harmed or killed by the outside evils of the world, and the bride is used in this illustration to invoke fear. Now, most of them are shocked of the tragic ending, but we see Helena begins laughing. Again, I think Helena is trying way too hard. Like, she's thinking, oh, this is what Helly would do in this situation. She would make a joke about how the story is about masturbation. But again, Irv doesn't find her efforts to be funny at all. Now, Mr. Milchick plays along with Helena's attempt to be in Helly and acts upset and cancels the marshmallow party by having Miss Wong burn them because
Marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out.
Again, tensions are high at this point as Irv tells Mark to stop with the Google eyes and yet again asks about her story and to describe the night gardener that she encountered. Now, Mark steps in as Irv says something pretty harsh but also very true as he tells Mark,
Using your pupils to make love to her, while your Audi's wife rots away somewhere.
Hey, shut up!
Now at this point it's a 3-on-1 and we see Helena claps back at Irv, and again she shows her card. She lets her emotions get the best of her as she reveals in this moment that she knows Irving's Audi's lifestyle, and she connects it to what's going on with the Innie version of Irv by saying that he's just upset because Irv won't ever see Bert again. But then she mentions that he's very lonely, which to me means that she's talking about how we've seen Irving in the outside world be very by himself with only having his dog by his side, which was a very mean and low blow by Helena, but also a big mistake on her end, showing her level of cruelness. As we see Irv leaves into the woods by himself. Now Mark checks in on Helena in her tent to attempt to cheering her up after the Irv situation. Now she acts as though that she knows that she was in the wrong from what she said to Irv, which leads to Mark showing her pity, and she apologizes for distracting him from finding his wife. Now unlike last time, we see them kiss, and it's Mark that actually led this kiss, and this leads to the first official sex scene in the entire show between Mark S. and Helena Egan. Now this to me is a move by Helena to yet again get Mark S. to not focus on finding Miss Casey and, as we know, Gemma in the outside world, but focus more on what he believes is Helly and them falling in love in their Innie's world. Now this isn't a soap opera, this is a well-written, very thought-provoking show, but what if some time passes by the time we reach the finale or by next season? How crazy would it be if Helena actually got pregnant in this moment? Also, I gotta give a shout out to the incredible editor of this episode because this might be one of my favorite transitions of the entire series. Now during this intimate love scene, we see Irv gets lost in the forest as he calls out to Mr. Milchick and Miss Wong, but slips and falls, causing his fire to go out. Now Irv finds a rock and lays against it as he falls asleep. Meanwhile, we see Helena tells Mark that she didn't like who she was on the outside and she was ashamed. Now Mark asks who she was, but she doesn't answer him as he says,
I don't care who you are out there. I care who you are with me.
Yeah, at this point, Mark is fully in love with her. As he turns her over, he kisses her, but his reintegration effects with his Audi kicks in and he sees Gemma briefly at the same time. Now I have a question for you all in the comments. Do you think that Helena was being genuine in this moment? Is there a chance that while yes, she's a mole for intel on behalf of the company and Project Harbor, but what percentage do you actually think that she's enjoying this experience? Does she have actual feelings for Mark S? Or is this a play to making Mark forget about Gemma and Miss Casey? Or another thought is this Helena getting back at Helly and making her hurt like she said she would in that video when she denied her request to leave by taking any Mark and, falling in love and all that good stuff. And she's doing that for embarrassing her at the gala and remembering that this is her life. Now we know that sleeping on the job is a no-no, especially for Irv, who would see the black goo left by his Audi, but this nightmare that he's having is quite unsettling. But the question is this a dream or is this Lumon's doing? As Irv wakes up, he's dressed in his office attire and comes across his MDR workstation. As he approaches, he finds moths that are attracted to the light of the computer. Now, if this is indeed a dream that he's having, moths in dreams can symbolize a variety of things, including a desire for knowledge, a search for enlightenment, or a connection to vulnerability. Moths being drawn to light can also represent search for truth and understanding that moths can symbolize the courage to pursue knowledge even when the path is difficult. Now, as Irv sits down, he begins to work, and we see the file name is under Montauk, which is something in our real world that has quite the history behind it. Now, the Montauk Project is a conspiracy theory that alleges that there were a series of United States government projects that were conducted on an Air Force station in Montauk, New York, for the purposes of developing psychological warfare techniques and exotic research, including time travel. Now, stories about this project have circulated since the early 1980s. According to a UFO researcher, the Montauk experiment stories seem to have originated with this highly questionable account from this individual who claimed to have recovered repressed memories of their involvement. Again, conspiracy theories, repressed memories, the moth, it all seems to be very purposeful within this scene. Now, as Irv works, we see Bert pulls the divider down and quickly gives him a smile. Now, if this isn't a dream, did we just see Bert's shadow twin? As we see, Irv looks over to find the Woe bride from the story as she's also working on the same file. Now, Irv looks at the screen and you'll notice that the bin's percentages are moving up and down and the numbers begin to scatter uncontrollably. Now, we have this shot of the numbers in the sequence here in no particular order, but from small to large, we have 1, 4, 5, 7. And on this next shot here, we have letters that appear to spell out Egan. Now, as they move into this circular motion and they seem to warn him or tell him something, maybe it's Helly as an Egan, as the bride comes up behind him as he awakes. Now, personally, I think this was all a dream, and knowing this character and their history with sleeping and having dreams or hallucinations that send him messages and he has to decode them. But let me know if you all believe that there is a possibility that this was all fabricated by Lumon. Now, as we end this very unusual episode, we see Irv is on a fast track back to the camp to finding Helly. Meanwhile, Mark wakes up to find her missing, and Dylan tells him that Irv never came back last night and he wasn't in his tent. Mr. Milchick arrives, and you can see that he's not in control of the situation and the look of concern of finding out that Helena is missing and Irv may be the reason for her disappearance. Now, we find that Helena snuck off to admire the so-called tallest waterfall after her night with Mark S, as Irv finds her and calls her Kid, common nickname he would give the refiners. Now, her response isn't much of Helly at all, especially when he says that he slept outside and he almost froze to death. Now, Irv cuts straight to the point and he says,
Who would have the power to send their Audi to the 7th floor?
As the jig is finally up. Irv takes her by the collar of her coat and drags her near the water, allegedly where Dieter died, bringing that story full circle, an Audi caught in a lie or deception and preparing to put her in great sorrow or distress. Now the others hear the screams to find Irv now has her and threatens Milchick, whose first name Seth is revealed in this moment for the first time for the innies, as he says to turn her back or else he'll kill her, as he proceeds to dump her head into the water. Now the tensions are all-time high, as he could risk killing both Innie and Outie, as Helena begs Seth to do it, as Irv reveals to Dylan and Mark that she is an Outie and she's an Egan. As he dumps her head in the water one last time, Milchick makes the call to remove the glass globe block, as we see the physical switch between Helena, and for the first time this season, we get the return of Helly. Now, for those that don't remember, Glasgow was one of the functions seen in the finale of season 1. Now, this seems to function as a way to block the signal that activates the Innie from appearing on the severed floor, and what Helena has been using whenever she's been around the Innies this whole time. Now, the word Glasgow comes from the Brittonic word glass, meaning gray-green or gray-blue, and also having a meaning of hollow. Now, we know the significance of colors within this show. We know how important green and blue is, and we also have to remember that the title of this episode is Woe Hollow. Now, Helly has no idea where she is and what's going on, as Irv is apologizing to her but also comforts her at the same time. Both Mark and Milchick arrive as Dylan watches from afar, and he apologizes to Irv for not believing him, as he's basically being sentenced to what the Innies will call death, as Milchick tells him,
"You have threatened collegial murder in the pond of Woe Hollow. For this there can be no penalty but immediate and permanent dismissal. There shall be no formal valediction, catered or otherwise. Your Outie will be notified forthwith."
To me, the line that Irv says to Dylan to hang in there is a reference to Dylan managing to holding the switches long enough for the Innies outside during the finale for 39 minutes, and Irv is basically saying to not give up and discovering the truth. I believe moving forward, we're going to see Dylan now taking up the mantle of figuring out what Irv was trying to do, and he's going to be now back in the game and not be beholden to Milchick's tricks and his perks to him, and finish again what Irv started by looking for the export halls that lead down to the testing floor. As we end with Milchick giving him the final dismissal on his position, as we get this incredible stare down between the two characters. As Irv gives his final goodbyes without words to the team, as Milchick says the following as they watch.
Your workspace will be cleared and any personal items discarded. It will be as if you, Irving B., never even existed nor drew a single breath upon this earth.
Now, I am to assume that this is the same process where the Innie leaves and the Outie enters, but what if, based on the fact that Milchick said that it'll be like he never existed, what if he uses the clean slate function and he completely wipes Irv's memory on the severed floor? Now, like I said up top, at the time of this recording, it's my actual birthday, so what an amazing gift by seeing this episode. Now, I've seen this episode a few times at this point, and I will definitely be rewatching it to get all the references, all the deeper meanings, but as of right now, I feel confident in saying that this is one of, if not the best episode of the series so far. This to me perfectly sums up the tone and the vibe and the unusual and unique and bizarre nature of this very show. Now, of course, for the majority of the season, I've been in the camp that it's been Helena the whole time, but I want to speak to the execution of the reveal. To me, it still worked, even though I knew that it was Helena, and the reason I say that it worked is because sometimes you have to remove yourself from watching a show and put yourself into the shoes of the character and just imagine their level of confusion and frustration and learning that Helly wasn't with them the whole time. Man, this episode was just fantastic. The mystery surrounding if Dieter's story was real or made up as a trick for the Innies, the whole location in general being questionable, the fact that Mark slept with Helena and not Helly, and there's still all this information regarding Mark, the outside version of him, being reintegrated and slowly seeing the effects from that. Now, for the last few weeks, I've been making additional theory videos that follow up my main breakdown, and let me tell you something right now, I cannot wait to hear you all's comments about this episode and hear your theories and read your theories and have them included in the next video. Now, next week's episode is titled Trojan Horse, and the synopsis reads, tensions emerge after the team suffers a loss, Outie Mark makes a breakthrough. Now, it sounds like the remaining MDR department has to live with the fact they might not be seeing Irv coming back, but they also have to face the fact that Helly is an Egan, and Mark's breakthrough may be Outie Mark experiencing the severed floor. There you have it. You all have made it to the end of this week's breakdown. I really appreciate y'all, man. Like, if you're still here, do me a favor, put in the comments right now, happy B-Day. Again, this is your chance to go crazy in the comments from your innie and your outies thoughts in this episode. What did you think about the entirety of the episode? Favorite moments, least favorite moments, Irv being the MVP, the reveal of Helena, were you right, were you wrong? Also, let me know your thoughts, your theories, your deeper meanings in the comments below. Now, if you enjoyed my breakdown and want to show your boy some birthday love, please hit the like button. Let's try to get this video to over 1,000 likes, and also consider sharing this video. And if this is your first time watching one of my videos, welcome to the channel. Consider sticking around and subscribing to the channel today. Now, if you want to support the channel even further, consider joining the channel memberships, whereby if we hit a certain number, I'm going to be putting more Severance exclusive content on the membership channel. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and remember,
stray not from Kyr's path, lest you roil nature's wrath.